Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the podcast. I am really glad that I get to introduce you to my friend Jay Kranda. I do like to have people in the studio every now and then, but Jay's an online campus pastor. And so I don't even know if he's real. He might just be in the cloud, but you need to know him. Meeting him over this method is probably the best. Jay, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I know I might be one of those like AI generated people. Have you seen those things where you can now pay
Yes.
AI companies to do faces and stuff for ad
Yes.
reads? It's
Yes.
crazy.
Yes. Well, it's going to be really interesting. Church, you start thinking about how does this work with church when uh, you've got a couple that's in marital trouble because one of them has an AI date, like that. No, I'm serious. That's where it's going.
I
You think
know.
that is going to be in pastors' offices. Like it's going, it's just really interesting.
Yeah, there was just a story a couple days ago where some teenager fell in love with an AI bot and unfortunately ended up taking his life over this
Oh, wow.
connection. It was kind of this crazy, and everybody told the stories. But the thing is that these technologies and these things bring up so many questions, and again, the church leader might go, "Oh, that's fairy tale. That's forever in the future." I go, "No, the technology is changing so quick that we're being introduced to so many weird questions, and it's just this is what's going to happen the next 10 years, and I think it will only accelerate, really."
So we'll get to the topic in a minute, but this is interesting. I was at a gathering of church leaders this past week in Atlanta, kind of a low key thing. We all got together and just sort of networked and shared and everything. And several people that are pretty well versed in AI were there. And I missed one of the guys' talks. And I said, "What I missed?" He said, "I'm going to give you one thing to take home." I said, "What's that?" And he said, "You and Adrian need a safety word." I'm like, "Dude, that's..." I'm not saying that to my wife. He said, "No, no, no." I said, "What are you talking about?" And
Yeah.
he said, "Well, so the way you're nodding, I guess now it only takes like 7 seconds of your voice recorded, fed
Yep.
into the right bot that people can and then Adrian gets a call from something that sounds like me saying, 'Hey, babe, I need cash and I can't remember the code for the debit card. What is it?'" And you go, "Oh, wow." So you need a safety word. Like, I'm not going to tell you what ours is, but whatever it is. So it's changing fast.
It's the amount of I mean, they've had this on like, ad companies now, or like, Meta or something are struggling with this because people are creating ads off of AI voices and likeness of like a Joe Rogan podcast, and they're trying to sell something, and Joe Rogan doesn't endorse it. And this is a real thing. And I like a lot of people, you get these emails sometimes of people trying to log into your accounts, and you're making sure you're clicking on the right emails. That's something that
Right.
we've all had to get a lot better at. Now the next level is that we're like, yeah, I'm gonna get a call from my wife, and she's gonna be asking me for something, and I might default to saying yes to it. And I think
Right.
the safety words and asking real questions, and it's hard. And this is where I really feel bad for the average church leader, because it's like they're just trying to shepherd their community, and it's like, what do we do with all this?
Well, and you've been on the front end of it. So for people that don't know, you're currently, I'll get the title wrong, but I'll take a guess. You change it, online pastor for Saddleback Church, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm the online pastor at Saddleback Church. Have been full time since 2013, so kind of before
Uh-huh.
COVID
When,
happened. And so, yeah.
when 2013 you took that job, how many people like you were there?
I think there may have been 5 or so. There's a couple maybe
Okay.
part time that maybe did it, but no, there weren't a lot of us. And yeah, it totally changed during COVID and post COVID for sure.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would say prior to 2013, one of the things most people don't realize is it costs a lot to stream your services and do stuff online. It was a bandwidth thing.
Right.
I tell a story actually in my book around how Pastor Rick we started streaming our services in 2004, 2003. And one of the reasons why we didn't really promote it was it would cost us thousands of dollars every month just to stream services.
Wow.
And one of the big game changers was when Facebook introduced live streaming
Hmm.
for free. And you can say whatever you want about Zuck and different feelings you might have, but when he did that for free, that was a huge game changer for churches. Now they could just offer this service that cost us, I think during at one point we were spending $8,000 a month to provide streaming because it was costly.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so then all of a sudden now churches just started to do it. And it's a positive because it's a free thing. But I don't think most churches coming out of that and coming out of COVID ever thought about streaming. Like, should we do it? What does this do? How do we leverage it right? And so sometimes when you offer something free, you don't think about the consequences. And sometimes that payment is actually a gate to see, is it worth it? And does it actually add value? How should we do it? Like, a lot of churches now are, I don't think churches should stream everything. Maybe you just stream one thing. Does it need to be a stream? Could it be a podcast? Maybe if you do streaming, like, you do it strategically. And these are the things that I think coming out of COVID now, as stuff is settling, I think some people are now revisiting.
That's good. Well, the pandemic certainly accelerated, particularly churches, willingness to try something new.
Yep.
Like my mother is in a great little church in literally the woods of North Carolina, nice town, you know, a couple hundred people, white columns, red carpet, the whole, you can picture it, right? And they had a new young pastor, and he started streaming during the lockdown. He got like his 10-year-old and a phone, and the 10-year-old stood up and taped him, and that was it. And had he tried to get that through the committees and the board and all that before, it would never have happened, ever, ever, ever. I don't know if they're still doing it now, but there was just it happened with us. When we started doing searches for churches, it was a new idea, and people were like, "Is that even of God? Or is that the devil? Is it's too corporate or whatever?" And I thought I'd spend my whole career just making it normal. That'd be the end of my career, is that if it's finally a normal idea to get some help, and we're there. Like, people are okay. We'll do that now. COVID accelerated churches' willingness to try new things, and so I can see how in your world.
Yeah, the amount of times that prior to COVID that I had to explain if what I was doing was biblical, or how do you think
satanic
about this, satanic,
maybe satanic,
or but it's and again, I understood the argument because I would always say, like, hey, like, I think in-person community is the best experience, and to say digital somehow replaces that, I think is naive. So, like, I use an example constantly around, I think the way you use digital best is how you might use it in a marriage or in a relationship. So my wife and I are texting, sending each other random reels that we think are funny, but we still come home to each other. And to think I'm ever going to replace my relationship with my wife with some kind of digital only experience is, I think, ridiculous. And I think churches should think of digital and technology that way. It should amplify what you're doing. At the same time, for me to be naive to think digital or technology couldn't get in the way of my relationship, that's naive, because I know that there are ways that digital could get in the way. I could send the wrong text. I could look at the wrong thing that leads me down a trail. I mean, there's so many things that I could be super aware of. So I think churches should be aware, like, digital is this tremendous tool that we get to leverage, but it also, I mean, again, like a fire, it could burn my house down, or it could cook me a good cup of coffee. We got to be aware of this. And this is one of those things that, coming out of COVID, I think there's a lot of things churches said yes to, and then, like, they never thought about it again. Or now, like, this could be like something that could get in the way. I was actually just listening to a pod from Howard Schultz, where he was talking on the Acquired podcast about their mobile app. Now 33, he hates it, but he also understands 33% of their sales.
I was fascinated with that one thing, because he was trying to build the third space. Correct. And now people just order online and walk in and walk out, and there's no community. And what happened? And I'm like, every pastor in America is asking that question.
Yeah, so I love that you heard this too. But it's something. Hey, it's this great thing, but it also creates all these new problems. That's a negative, because I know, I've read the Onward book, and I know he's so big on the experience, and I think that's how pastors should think about all this stuff. Like, digital technology is not the savior. It's not. It should be used for your objective. And so understand. So, like, I love this, because what I love about that conversation is church's one of the greatest strengths. I mean, outside of the gospel and communion with God, those things are automatic. I think it's the community you experience. And so to think again, this is why I always thought the dilemma of like turning on the stream is going to prevent people from coming to church. I would go like, wait, is content the reason why people show up every week? Like, I don't
Right.
think, I don't,
Not at all.
and if that is like that's keeping people from coming, then I would go, you need to reevaluate what happens in the room then.
Okay. Can we do true confessions?
Yeah.
Can I confess? It's good
Yes.
for the soul, right? I was talking to somebody the other night, and they said, "Where do you go to church?" I go to church, right back there, that steeple back in the back, and it was over that shoulder, right there. Anyway, great church, and they're like, "Why do you go?" Well, I'm a recovering preacher, so I know what the answer should be. It should be the white hot vision. It should be the transformative preaching, or the worship takes me to another place, or whatever. The reality is, my kid likes the student ministry.
Yeah.
Our friends go there, and it's not far from my house.
Yep. Yeah.
So sorry, everybody who thought I was going, and sorry, Pastor, if you're listening, I really do like you. It's not,
Yeah.
but it's just, the older I get, the more I realize it's the incarnational part of the church that
Yep.
leaves the deepest impression on me. So I just thought, hey, audience, why are we talking to Jay? Because Jay's the online pastor. He's supposed to be the totally geeked out dork that wants everything online. Like that. I remember 15 years ago sitting on a forum with somebody who was talking about doing virtual reality church with the goggles and so that's what an online pastor should look like and here's Jay, and he wrote a book for us. So what does the online church pastor write for everybody and Saddleback's probably the biggest one out there. His book title is Online Church is Not the Answer.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're trying to like get fired or what, but why write that?
I will say jokingly, I've had a couple friends of mine who are online pastors. I feel like they don't text me back as quick. And so, I think my subtitle is Beyond Just Streaming to Hybrid Disciple Making. And really what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people, there's tremendous tools, and some of you that are maybe new in this space, you don't realize, but like there's tools like the Church Online platform that Life Church and a lot of large churches built. And there's a lot of other tools that have been built, and people started to stream stuff and upload stuff, but that's the limit of how they think about digital technology. See, I know for your company, Vanderbloemen, some of the best tech you use is really boring.
Yep.
And the reality though is like if you kind of peel back there's something called a CRM that most pastors don't think about. It might be their database. That tool solves a very specific problem. And I want to encourage pastors to go, what is your objective? And this is where I would push, where I would go, your objective isn't to fill a room. Your objective is to produce spiritual fruit. And so what I'm trying to get there is, okay, can digital or technology aid you in that objective? So there are things that still need to happen in the room, like will always happen in the room. I go back to, there's a reason why I come home every night to my wife and my family. But to me, to think that I can't use my phone to stay connected to my wife and amplify our relationship, I think is counterintuitive. And so I kind of push this conversation into, again, I don't think churches need an online pastor. We have an online pastor because we're one of the largest churches in the world. And we have unique benefits. But let's think about digital in a way that aids in what you're trying to do. And I think digital actually in technology, anytime you've been probably through more of these seasons than me, where like everybody talks about, you got to be on this, you got to be on this, you got to be on this. And really the question is, do you need to be on it? Considering your objective, the people you're trying to reach.
That's right.
And this is where this is the lens. This is what I unpack in my book. Like, I believe in online. I believe even with digital ministry. Our church has a VR ministry, but to think that every church needs to do that, like that's where I go, no. Yeah. There's things we do because of our objectives.
But let me push back a little, Jay, because I'm thinking of my mom's church, right? I'm thinking of this little church, and they could easily hear that and say, well, we're not one of the largest, so we don't need to do that or whatever. But when I was pastor, the last church I served, First Presbyterian in Houston, we were on television back when that was a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it was on Sundays and blah, blah, blah. And it was the very first church in Texas to be on television. It's like, something they'd done forever. The whole thing started when television broadcasting was now an option for local entities. And a family gave a bunch of money so that the pastor could be on TV, so that the shut-ins could see church. That was the only reason we did it. And we happened to grow and have people come because of it. But it was not a reach more people thing. It was a pastoral moment thing. And I think there's still some fruit there, because the amount of money we had to raise every year to stay reaching those shut-ins was really, really high, and it's not now. So maybe there are digital pieces that can connect those who are unable. You and your wife, when you're across the country doing something, you FaceTime instead of, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I don't know if that's what you're driving at, but I think that if every church thinks hard, they'll think of a way to leverage things to do more effective ministry.
Yeah, and I think there's this exaggeration of, hey, online, like there used to be a saying, like early on in the when I first got engaged in this 2009 2010, people say like, you watch church in your pajamas and stuff, and I would always throw up at that. I would like, please, let's not use this phrase anymore. It's like calling it I church now, like everything had to have an I,
Right.
a lowercase I. I go, the reality is that that's true. Like there's like 3 S's, like people dealing with sickness, there's security issues where somebody may not feel comfortable, like because of something they're going through, or different seasons of life, like where like you might have just delivered, like you just had your first kid and you're just working like crazy and you can't really like, I go, there's all sorts of reasons. The other thing, the reality is that there's just this tension and we got to manage it where like people are just coming to church less physically. And what I mean by that is I'm not trying to replace something. Like I'm saying that the average churchgoer is still they're going 2 times a month. Well, guess what? Like they can listen to a pod on the way to work, or they watch something on YouTube and they can stay engaged.
I'm getting jaded as I get older. I am pretty fed up with people saying, well, people aren't coming to church as much. The church must be dying in America. We're becoming like Europe. No, back to your Howard Schultz, up where I play golf, a little north of the city, there's a Chick-fil-A on the way there. They tore it down in May, completely got rid of it. Didn't reopen till a week or 2 ago. We're recording this in November. So they lost 6 months of revenue, and they sunk new construction costs in the new one they built where the old one was. And what did they build? 6 drive-through lanes, no parking lot, no dining.
Wow. Oh.
That's where the world is going. That's not people aren't going to church because Christianity's irrelevant. It's not. It's just, so in that economy, I think a book like yours probably helps people figure out, well, what should be digital, what should not. Because they are coming, they're not coming back. Like they'll come, but it's how many people are different people are coming every month, not every week attendance.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is a big thing we have to think through as church leaders is, I think there's something about meeting people where they're at, like Kate, it's the women at the well, like we're going where people are, but also introducing strategic friction. So I think this is where like a lot of church leaders just don't have the experience. So for example, like Vanderbloemen, you provide tons of free resources, but there's also strategic friction and maybe a payment. And that's because obviously there's structure and operating costs. Like you have to do that as a company. A church leader, I don't know if they've really thought about friction. Like they just serve people. And so for example, and churches denominations go through this, like, oh, we need to just serve people in the community. And then they just become like long-term, like there's different ministries that just become public service, and they're not even doing gospel stuff anymore because they drift too far. I think with this,
or people forget time is money, and they pour. Correct. I remember running a fundraiser. It was a 5K road race while I was in seminary at Princeton, and I think I probably put literally 2 weeks of work into the thing, and we raised $2,000 or $3,000. It's like, dang, I could have worked for 2 weeks and earned that, and not had to deal with it. But churches are forever continuing to serve without realizing time is an investment. If I could put one plugin in front of everybody, maybe you guys have already found it, but Google has a fairly new plugin, assuming you use Gmail and Google Calendar and all that, where if you're the HR director, you can plug in everybody's salary. So when you're having a meeting, there's a clock that says this meeting is costing us, and it just rolls. Well, it's so smart.
That's awesome.
Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's get something done, because look what we just spent.
That's a great, I'm going to totally find that. That's awesome.
It's just a Google plugin, but it's it's back to the question of digital. Just because it's digital doesn't mean it's fruitful.
Yep. Yep.
That's what
So
I hear
like,
you saying.
yeah, no, and this is where like, and again, and part of it too is introducing friction sometimes is painful, but like this is where like practically, like I would say like I think that there are things that you can decentralize, meaning like doesn't have to happen in the room. So like you might have a membership class or some kind of training, like Zoom and YouTube can be great at content consumption, but maybe you might go, hey, we're going to put this class or this training on Zoom in a format because we want discussion, or maybe a podcast. But then you gate it where you go, hey, like, and I'll take a very generic example to help people listening. Is you might have membership at your church, whatever that means. Maybe they can consume content part, like the hour or 2 hour part on Zoom, maybe twice a year for people that can't come in person, but still you have an interview before they become an official member. Now that's a generic example, but this is where you go, just be something could be hybrid. Like, and like this is very popular with
Oh,
doctoral programs.
where we see it in the we serve. I mean, we had the joy of serving you guys
Yeah.
recently. We serve a lot, most of the very large churches, but over half of our church work is for churches, the normal church of 300, 200, 100. And where we're seeing this more than anything is the stupid monthly finance meeting. Yes, that can happen over Zoom. Like
Yeah.
that's where it's really.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And then on the, I will say on the flip though, like one of the things I've learned running, thousands of Zoom type of meetings is you have to be really deliberate to make Zoom even compelling. So like we've learned a lot around, like we do a lot of trainings on Zoom that are a couple hours, and at the front I'll start and I'll say, hey guys, welcome to Zoom, and like this thing, whatever. I go, hey, in 5 minutes I'm going to throw you into a breakout room, introduce yourself, say where you're from, and we have to plan for breakout rooms discussions to even make it like roundtables. And I say that I'm not, again, Zoom is not the answer in the sense of like the deliverable. I bring it up because it's a standard, but think through like, what are you trying to do? And I think this goes back to churches have to understand that we ask our attenders, members to do a lot. Show up on Sunday, serve, be in a group, give. There's a lot. And so be very strategic when something needs to be in person. Make sure it adds value, because if you say it needs to be in person and then it's not that, like, I could have just gotten this on the podcast, then reevaluate. Like people then are going to stop showing up. And so like, I think in person is really important, but I also think there's so much that happens digital and technology that are compelling. Well, merge it together considering your audience and your objectives.
Yeah, well, we figured, back in 19, we're not a big office. We're an executive search firm that helps people on Team Jesus, right? So that's a pretty tight niche. I think right when the pandemic, right before in 19, we had like 45 full-time employees, something like that. And then the pandemic hits, and I read this Leading Beyond the Blizzard article that was very famous for like, right now, you need to decide if you own a business, is this a bad storm, a snow in for 3 days? Is it a blizzard that's going to be several weeks? Or is it a mini ice age that's a year and a half? And then decide how you, and I decided on the mini ice age. So long story short, we had to cut 40% of our overhead in 1 day, which is people. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible day. It's the only reason, well, it's one of many reasons we got through the pandemic, but we cut down, we were down to like 24 staff. So fast forward to now, we're doing roughly twice the amount of work we were doing in 2019. And we have about 42 or 3 full-time employees.
Wow.
So the pandemic forced us to learn some efficiencies, and then forced us to throw out some things that are not, like for us, if we're doing initial interviews, Zoom's easy. And then you don't have to coordinate. But when you get down to the final people, before we go to a client, we are getting on a plane. We're going to sit, because there's something face-to-face that happens that cannot happen.
Great.
Eric Geiger, your neighbor over at Mariners, he says, the reason we love worship, we don't sing very well. We're not as diverse as heaven. It's because the music's going to be so much better in heaven. But the reason we love a good worship service is it's an echo of what we're going to spend eternity doing. And he said, the thing with online church is it's an echo of the echo.
Yep.
Isn't that good?
Yeah, it's so good. And like one of the things I really encourage church leaders to think through, like even the proposition of things you might invest in more heavily post-COVID. is, yeah, invest in the digital experience like Mariners does. Like they have an online pastor, they do a lot of stuff that's really cool. But like one of the value propositions is what you can't do well online is minister to the whole family.
Right.
So like the kids, like I have 3 kids. I have a 13-year-old, 11, and an 8. Like
Oh, you're getting dumb, aren't you?
I know, yeah. I'm not as cool.
Yeah,
I'm not as cool as
when
I
they
thought I
turn
was.
14, call me back, because that
I
was the
know.
year I got dumb. Every time when someone turned 14.
Well, like one of we have Saturday services at our church, and we go to the Saturday service at 6 because the youth program, our junior high ministry, is really amazing, and 2 of our kids are in the junior high program, and they love this specific. So we go. So I say that like even like the value proposition, like if you're running ads or if you're thinking about inviting people, like hey, it's important to go to church as a family, especially if you have kids. So the value proposition isn't just like coming and getting content. It's yeah, like obviously we have a small group and we go to church and have dinner after Saturdays every week. Like that's a thing we do. But our kids now having that experience. So this is where like, okay, how are you inviting people to come to Christmas and Easter? What are the things that you might more staff heavy and you got to think about the experience? Or the whole family is a huge value proposition that is underutilized. And this is where digital, like our biggest YouTube channel at our church is our Saddleback Kids YouTube
Wow.
channel. And they have done amazing, and we believe in it. We just launched a Bible with Zondervan. It's amazing, but our kids program our team doesn't think that that's better than coming in person. No, it's together. We do a bunch of stuff on
Yep.
YouTube, but we have this amazing kids experience.
Yeah. Well, I had heard it years ago, and it's certainly not my line. But the pandemic made me remember the first thing God cursed in the Bible. Pop quiz. What's the first thing God cursed in the Bible?
Oh my goodness, cursed. It's just the rebellion against
Yeah,
Abel.
that's what everybody says. And maybe they're right. Okay. But before all that, he issued all these benedictions, right?
Yeah.
He, let there be light, and it was good. Let there be waters in the heavens and
yeah.
the earth, and it was good. And then this is good, and this is good. And then he makes humans and says, now this is very good. And then he says, what's not good?
Oh, interesting.
Not good that people be left
Yeah, that's
alone.
good. That's good.
Before sin entered the world, God cursed solitude.
Yeah, that's good.
And so, if you're a pastor out there that's worried, no one's ever going to come to my church because they all go to Stephen Furtick online or Matt Chandler online or Andy Wood online or whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, people have an innate hatred for loneliness, and they're starving for connection. I'm assuming the book goes into, give some tools for how to discern which is the online, which is not. Is that fair?
Yeah, I provide some kind of frameworks and some things to process through a team. I really wrote it. I mean, really, it came out of this idea that I've had this. My church has given me a luxury to think about this for a bunch of time. And I know as I've talked to thousands of church leaders over the year, we created a resource years ago on the state of online church prior to the pandemic, and I wanted to provide something that you could go through as a team and really like walk through this together. And really, the hope is you walk through it with a staff, your volunteer teams in such a way like
good.
Here's how we think about digital. We believe it's a tool. We got to wield it wisely. And here's some of the things. And so there's some high level principles. I kind of start off with some like concepts to wrestle through. And then here's some practical tools that you can go through to kind of really embrace it. Because really the charge of it is, I think it's something we get to leverage, but you got to leverage it right. And also your church has to determine like, how do we empower this? Because it can't just, and this is why I kind of jokingly say online church is not the answer, is that you hire somebody like me and then you go, oh, I'm going to solve it. The online pastor is going to solve it. And I go, no, the average church doesn't need an online pastor, but you need everybody thinking about it as a tool that in your tool belt that you get to pull out at the right time and the wrong times. And this is where like the challenge is empower everybody to think about this. But churches just don't have I went to seminary. Like this isn't something we talk about. It's not something, like I think there's only one digital program, like church online program in one seminary. Not surprising. It's at Liberty. But like let's think about this in a more holistic way. And the last thing I'll say is I had one of my friends, and I talk about this in the book, that pastors a church in Huntington Beach. And he said, he called me up during COVID at a church of about 800, 700. And he said, Jay, he was actually one of my professors in seminary. And he goes, Jay, I feel like pre-COVID, we were flirting with digital. COVID was like a shotgun wedding moment. And now the question is this a healthy or unhealthy relationship?
Right.
And my hope is I provide some
Do we
tools.
want to get this annulled?
Yeah, do we want to get this annulled? And really, I hope churches don't divorce from digital. I hope they just see it as something they can leverage in the right ways. I don't think it's the answer to everything. I think you gotta leverage it in very strategic areas, and that's really what I unpack.
Yeah. Well, and this is for free bonus content. If you're pastoring out there and you're worried that everybody's going to online church and your sermon doesn't measure up, here's my suggestion for you. Because at least 50% of all preachers are below average preachers. It's just the math doesn't lie, right? So
yeah.
But that doesn't negate calls. If you're worried about your preaching, let me encourage you. You know, Billy Graham used to say, I get up to the table to write my sermon, I put a Bible on one side of me and a newspaper on the other side of me. Well, what if you took the Bible on one side of you and news for your one zip code and just hyper contextualize all your preaching so that the digital things that are out there are evergreen and fairly generic, but nobody knows your 6 city blocks or whatever your little version of parish is better than you, and people come to hear what God's saying about our particular neighborhood right here, right now. That's just my take. You might call me crazy, Jay, but that's
great. An amazing tool to kind of echo. You could use google.com/trends, and you can look in your zip code what's trending on Google, what people are searching for.
Oh, that's worth the podcast. Say that again, please.
Yeah, so it's google.com/trends, I believe. And you could just put in your zip code and what's trending in your area, which you can just see what people are literally searching. So like that might be I mean, I don't get newspapers. You might still get newspapers delivered to you. But
I get the Sunday paper.
You get the Sunday paper. I do not get the Sunday paper.
Why?
Why?
It's cheaper than just the digital.
Is it? Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because they have, it doesn't make sense, but you think, am I getting taken here? But like over 50% of a newspaper's ad revenue is the Sunday paper. So they'd rather move that to keep the ad sell
That makes sense.
And then so we look at the digital, and then just for kicks, we look at the comics on Sunday.
That's great. I love that.
So, yeah. So you don't have to be online. You don't have to be everything for everybody. But maybe Jay's book can help you figure out, how do we leverage this moment? The book is Online Church is Not the Answer. Jay Kranda is the author. Jay, where can we go find that? Is it on Amazon? Do you have a blog?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. I have an audio and a print there you can buy. I also sell some bundles on my website, jkranda.com, if you want to buy a bunch for very affordable there as well. But thank you, William, for having me on and let me know about it.
I like you, but this is not about you. No, really. I've said this. Some of the listeners have heard me say it. Growing up, I used to think people would say, what would have been a cool time to live? And I'm like, the Renaissance. How cool would it have been to be alive when Da Vinci's doing his thing, Michelangelo's doing his thing, things are getting invented. I think the next 20 years are going to make the Renaissance look like a non-event.
Interesting.
And what I've noticed, so you're on here because I like you, but I think there's a pattern in human history, kingdom history. I think every time God wants a seismic shift of growth in his church, not, we're using drums now or whatever, but a big time, every time he wants a kingdom breakthrough, he precedes the moment with a communication breakthrough.
Yeah.
You go think through it. I mean, how'd the Reformation start? Well, a printing press. How did Paul plant all those churches? Well, Rome built roads. I mean, you can see it if you look for it. And I think right now we're on the beginning edge of the greatest communication breakthrough ever, which just tells me we're near the end. This is a big kingdom breakthrough, and we're really close to the finish line. And leveraging this communication breakthrough, I think, is going to be how we're scored when it's time to score who did what. So sorry, sermon over. That was a little long.
No, that was great. I'm writing. I just wrote down notes.
If you don't want to get to the finish line, then don't order Jay's book. But if you want a kingdom breakthrough in your church, no, it may not go that far.
You just gave me. I'm gonna AI break that up for an ad now. It's gonna be like that's the full
Go
circle.
for
We've
it.
come. Yeah.
I'll even tell you my safety word. Hey, listen, Jay, thanks for being with us. So good to have you here, and really do go check out the book. And Jay, please come back on again, and maybe one time we'll do it in person just for kicks.
I know, just for kicks. I'll bring my paper. I'll buy the paper and then I'll bring it. So
thanks to all of you for listening. We're always glad to introduce you to our friends, some of whom you know, some of whom you don't know. We think it's kind of fun. You can go to our show notes are at vandercast.com. Just put your email in. We won't send you orders for Ginsu knives and if you order now, but just get the notes so you can find jkranda.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week.